Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melody Via. I'm up here at Immortals Inc. today with Mikey.
What is going on today, John?
Well, we have a fairly recent release that the store managed to get in, and that is the second edition of Starfinder. Now, this is the playtest iteration.
Playtest iteration.
Yeah, so we still have first edition Starfinder on the shelves. It is still available, but second edition, it's essentially right now in playtest as an expansion of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So if you need the remastered Pathfinder core and player core and the GM core in order to be able to use this, but with that in hand, you're basically able to take your Pathfinder stuff into the distant future and explore space, right? So let's talk about the credits. Thurston Hillman is the creative director, and then there is a big team of Paizo artists, writers, developers, editors, et al. A whole lot of people worked on this book. And the reason we're seeing a second edition, first off, is to move away from the OGL license, right? So this is published under the ORC license. And then also, like I mentioned, to make this compatible with Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So folks who want to be able to move their characters between Starfinder and Pathfinder, likely involving a little bit of time travel, can do so. It is very much a playtest. They do plan on eventually having a Starfinder player core because they talk about it a lot throughout the book, and presumably there'll be a GM core as well, and then I don't know if there'll be a new Alien Archive or a Monster Core, but we'll find out. Hard copies of Cosmic Birthday, which we'll talk about real soon.
Interesting.
Too. But there are a couple of demos out there that you can grab from Paizo's website, and there are some adventures that are available in PDF only, and there's another one that's coming out in October too. So there are some sources of monsters. Oh, and also the free RPG Day product that we mentioned.
Yes.
That guy has some monsters for Starfinder 2nd Edition as well. But there is no scenario in this book. There are no monsters. There's also no description of basic game mechanics. So you're going to need to pull the basic game mechanics out of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition book. And keep in mind, the dice mechanic and the action economy from that are very different than what we saw in Starfinder 1st Edition. So diving into what actually is in the book, the first big thing you get is ancestries. Ancestries is the replacement word for races. We see all 7 of the ancestries that were in Starfinder 1 in here, including human, which does have a few differences from the human that's in the Pathfinder book. Then there are 3 new core species, which were previously in Alien Archive, so they were playable in 1st Edition. They are the Barathu, which are basically jellyfish that are sapient.
Okay.
Patra, who are basically cat people, and Skittermanders, which are kind of furry goblins.
Interesting.
Yeah, Skittermanders are an unusual species. Let's just leave it at that. Big ears, furry, and very independent-minded. We also get heritage and ancestry feats added in here to bring these new ancestries in line with what we see in Pathfinder 2. And it's worth mentioning that in Starfinder 1, our races took up 2 pages. Here, with everything that's included, we're looking at 4 pages for each of them. There are 2 versatile heritages. So heritages are basically subspecies of each of these different ancestries. There's 2 that you can apply to any of the different ancestries. The first one is Borai, which are basically undead versions of all of them. And then Prismeni, which are kind of affected by the drift. So the drift is hyperspace, how you travel quickly between star systems in Starfinders. You enter into the drift, and there were some big drift-related events recently in Starfinder 1st Edition. I guess recently, last year or so. I think we talked about some of that, right? And the Prismeni are basically people that were changed through those drift events. And then we get into backgrounds. Also in the Ancestries chapter, we get 27 Starfinder-specific backgrounds. You can mix and match your Pathfinder backgrounds in here as well for the course of the playtest. Next chapter is classes. We see Envoy, Mystic, Operative, Solarian, and Soldier that were all in Starfinder First Edition Core. It's worth mentioning the Mystic is a divine, occult, or primal spellcasting class, depending upon their sponsorship, essentially. And then we get the Witch Warper from previously from the Character Operations Manual, which can either be an arcane or an occult casting class. The playtest for the Mechanic and the Technomancer are not included here. Paizo has announced that those playtests will be coming out next year, probably for a future book. And we're looking at about 12 pages for each of the class entries, and you do get specific playtest notes on each of them saying, hey, we want you to look at this particular aspect of each of these different classes. After that, we get into skills. Skill section is fairly short because we're only really covering 2 skills in detail. Those are computers and piloting. The rest of the skills are coming right out of Pathfinder, but there is an updated skill action list from Pathfinder 2 because a couple of those are slightly changed. Most of them are awfully similar, though. Then we have a chapter of feats with an updated feat lists that do incorporate the Pathfinder player core feats. And then there's around 60 new feats for Starfinder specifically, some of which are kind of adapted from Pathfinder ones. Next chapter is equipment, where we cover currency, which is primarily credits or UPBs. UPBs are basically building blocks that you use if you want to 3D print something, essentially creating things. And it's worth pointing out that one of the big things that's presented in this chapter that I think is a huge improvement from Starfinder First Edition is you get a system to improve your gear. So Starfinder First Edition, your characters are very, very gear dependent. There is certainly an element of that carries over into Second Edition as it's presented here, but there is a mechanic for taking the piece of equipment you have already and improving it if you have the crafting skill. I think that's a real big improvement, and I like the way that they've implemented that. I definitely want to see how that plays at the table. In here, we see armor, shields, weapons, upgrades, augmentations, magic items, and gear. And like I said, the upgrade rules are specific to armor, shields, and weapons. You can purchase gear at a higher level if you don't want to upgrade something you already have. But the big thing is here, it means you don't need to replace your gear every time you level. And I do think they did a better job of leveraging that and integrating it into the system than they were able to do with Starfinder Enhanced. Spells are broken down into arcane, divine, occult, and primal. We do have heightened spells. This section is very much dependent upon having the player core for Pathfinder. And they do mention that when they get around to doing the Starfinder player core, after they get through the playtest, all of those spells will be integrated into one place, so you won't need multiple books. There's about 20 deities that are described in the next chapter. A little bit of shuffling from the deities that were presented in Starfinder First Edition, and there's pretty much story description going on there for why that happens. And then there are a few Starfinder-specific rules, environments. So we got space travel, so we got to have rules for gravity, different atmospheres, different natural environments, a little bit of touching on spaceships and some rules for radiation hazards. And then we've got glitching, which is kind of a computer-related issue where things glitch up, like happens during our videos sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah. And then untethered, like if you're just floating off in space.
Oh, wow.
And suppressed conditions for when people are shooting large caliber weapons at you. And then the things that are missing that are worth pointing out is there are no starship construction or combat or rules, and there's not really any monsters or NPCs in this book. So you're going to need some place to pull on those monsters and NPCs. And if you want to try to run a Starfinder First Edition adventure, you're going to need to kind of wing it a little bit when it comes to the starship combat rules. It's 264 pages. In spite of the fact that I did mention a couple of things that are missing, there is a whole lot here that you can use to run a solid campaign. It is a paperback, not hardcover. It is all full color. The production values are exactly what you'd come to expect from a Paizo product. This is a solid book, and it is $47.50. Also worth mentioning, because this is a playtest, you can get the PDF for free. If you want to playtest off of the PDF, that's absolutely functional. But if you want a hardcover copy, or a hard copy rather, not hardcover, for the table, stop in at the store. We got copies here. Available at immortalsinc.com as well.
I'm sure the collectors want to play test hardcover, so
They might as well.
understand. Well said, John. Thanks for coming in. Check it out yourselves, and I'll see you guys next time.
Till next time, folks. Good gaming.